The wind was a blade. It sliced through the thin fabric of Elara's coat, through the worn wool of her sweater, and settled deep in her bones. A cold that was more than just weather. It was a cold that came from the soul outward. She pulled her 2 children closer, tucking them into the hollow of her body. Leo, at 7, tried to be brave. He clenched his jaw, his small face a mask of stoicism that broke her heart. Mia, only 5, had given up on bravery hours ago. She trembled against Elara's chest, her breaths coming in tiny, shallow puffs of white in the merciless air. "Mommy, I'm hungry," Mia whispered, her voice a fragile thread against the city's roar. "I know, sweet pea. I know." Elara's own stomach was a tight, aching knot. She pressed a kiss to the top of Mia's head, her lips numb. "Close your eyes. Let's play the game." Leo groaned softly. "Not the picnic game again." "It's a good game," Elara insisted, her voice thin but determined. "Okay, I'm packing the basket. And today we have fried chicken. So crispy you can hear the crunch from a mile away." She felt Mia stir a little, a flicker of interest in the bleak landscape of their reality. "And mashed potatoes," Elara continued, her eyes shut tight against the sight of the grimy alley wall. "With so much butter they're yellow like the sun. And gravy, a whole river of gravy. With biscuits?" Leo asked, his voice small. "The fluffiest biscuits in the whole world," she promised, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. "And for dessert, a big chocolate cake. With sprinkles." They were silent for a moment, lost in the phantom feast. It was a cruel magic, summoning ghosts of warmth and fullness that only made the present reality sharper, more painful. This was their life now. An escape. That's what she had called it. Fleeing in the dead of night with a garbage bag of clothes and the last $20 from her secret jar. Leaving Marcus and his fists and his voice that could curdle hope into fear. She thought she was running toward freedom. She hadn't realized freedom could be this cold, this hungry, this desolate. Every door had closed. Every friend she thought she had was too scared of Marcus to help. The shelters were full, overflowing with stories just as broken as hers. So they ended up here. In a forgotten corner of a city that glittered with a wealth that felt like a personal insult. Huddled behind a dumpster, praying for a morning that felt impossibly far away. She had failed them. The thought was a constant, vicious echo in her mind. She had brought them into this world, promised to protect them, and she had led them into a frozen alley to starve. The shame was a physical weight, pressing down on her, making it hard to breathe. A long, black car purred to a stop at the end of the alley. Its headlights cut through the gloom, pinning them in a sudden, harsh glare. Elara flinched, instinctively pulling the children tighter, trying to make them smaller, invisible. Fear, sharp and metallic, flooded her senses. It was him. Marcus. He'd found them. Of course he had. He always found her. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage of bone. But the figure that emerged from the car was not Marcus. He was tall, impossibly so, and wore a dark, tailored coat that spoke of a world she couldn't even imagine. He didn't move with Marcus's swaggering menace. He moved with a quiet, deliberate grace. He stood for a moment at the mouth of the alley, a silhouette against the city lights. Elara held her breath. He took a slow step forward, then another. His face was calm, his expression unreadable in the shadows. He wasn't a threat. He was something else, something she couldn't identify. Julian Vance felt the cold seep through the leather of his expensive shoes. He had just left a boardroom where billions were discussed like pocket change. He was on his way to a home that was more of a museum than a sanctuary. A vast, silent space that echoed with the memory of a laugh he would never hear again. Loneliness was his constant companion. It sat beside him in the car. It waited for him at the dinner table. It lay beside him in the cavernous bed he shared with a ghost. He was driving the long way home, a habit he'd developed to delay the inevitable reunion with silence. And then he saw them. A flash of movement in the periphery. A woman and 2 small children, huddled together like a single, shivering creature against the brutalist brick of an alley. His driver, Charles, started to accelerate past. "Stop," Julian said, his voice quiet but firm. The car slid to a halt. "Sir, wait here." He got out, the frigid air a shock after the climate-controlled interior of the vehicle. He saw the woman flinch as his headlights caught her. He saw the way she wrapped her arms around her children, a shield of fragile flesh and bone against the world. He saw her terror, and he saw her exhaustion. It was a depth of weariness he recognized, though its source was so different from his own. He approached slowly, keeping his hands visible. He had learned long ago that his size could be intimidating. He softened his posture, trying to appear as non-threatening as possible. "Are you all right?" he asked. The words felt stupid, inadequate. Of course she wasn't all right. The woman didn't answer. She just stared at him, her eyes wide and haunted in her pale, drawn face. He could see the faint tremor in her hands. He took another step. He could see the children more clearly now. A little boy, trying so hard to be brave. A little girl, her face buried in her mother's coat, shivering uncontrollably. They weren't wearing nearly enough to protect them from this kind of cold. His heart, a numb and distant thing for so long, gave a painful lurch. He shrugged off his heavy wool overcoat. It was warm from his body heat. He stepped forward and gently draped it over her and the children. It swallowed them whole, a dark cocoon of warmth. Elara gasped at the sudden weight, the impossible heat. The fabric smelled faintly of cedar and something clean and masculine. It was an impossible kindness. People didn't do this. People walked by. They averted their eyes. They pretended not to see. "You can't stay out here," the man said, his voice a low, gentle rumble. "You'll freeze." She found her voice, a dry, rasping thing. We're fine." It was a lie so transparent, it was pathetic. He didn't call her on it. He just looked at her, his gaze steady and filled with a quiet concern that unnerved her more than aggression would have. "I have a warm place you can stay," he said. "Just for the night. A meal. You and your children. No questions asked." Her mind screamed at her. "No, don't trust him. Men who offer help always want something. You know this." The lessons Marcus had taught her were carved into her very being. But then Mia coughed, a thin, rattling sound that shook her small frame. And Elara looked down at her children's faces, blue-tinged in the cold, and knew she had no choice. Her pride, her fear, none of it mattered more than them. She gave a single, jerky nod. Relief washed over the man's face, a subtle softening of his features. "Okay," he said softly. "Come with me." He led them to the car. The door opened with a quiet, expensive click. The interior was a different universe. Warm air, smelling of leather, rushed out to greet them. It felt like stepping into a dream. The children, dazed, allowed themselves to be buckled into the plush seats. Elara slid in beside them, the man's coat still wrapped around her shoulders like a shield. The car pulled away from the curb, leaving the cold, dark alley behind. Elara watched the city lights blur past the window, her heart a confusion of terror and a tiny, fragile spark of something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope. The elevator ascended in silence. It wasn't a normal elevator. It opened directly into the apartment. No, not an apartment. A penthouse. The door slid open, and Elara's breath caught in her throat. She was standing in a cavern of glass and steel. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a breathtaking panorama of the city, a carpet of glittering lights spread out below them. The space was enormous, furnished with minimalist pieces that looked more like art than furniture. It was beautiful, and it was silent, so silent, the kind of silence that amplifies every small sound, every heartbeat. "This way," the man, he had introduced himself as Julian, said, his voice echoing slightly in the vast room. He led them down a long hallway. Leo and Mia clung to Elara's hands, their eyes wide with a mixture of awe and fear. They had never seen a place like this. Elara felt a surge of inadequacy, her worn boots scuffing the polished marble floor. She felt like a stray dog brought in from the rain, about to dirty the pristine carpets. Julian opened a door to a guest wing. "You can stay here," he said. "There are 2 bedrooms, a bathroom. Please, make yourselves comfortable." He paused at the door. "Are you hungry? I can have something sent up." Elara nodded, unable to speak. The picnic game was still a fresh wound in her mind. "I'll take care of it," he said. He gave them a small, hesitant smile and then retreated, leaving them alone in the luxurious suite. The children immediately explored, touching the soft blankets on the beds, staring at their reflections in the gleaming surfaces. Elara sank onto the edge of a bed that was softer than any she had ever known. She was waiting for the other shoe to drop. This level of kindness didn't exist without a price. She was bracing herself for what he would ask for in return. A short while later, a quiet knock came at the door. It was Julian, carrying a tray laden with food. Not fancy food, but simple, comforting things. Thick sandwiches, bowls of hot soup, glasses of milk, and a plate of chocolate chip cookies. He set it down on a small table. "I hope this is okay." "Thank you," Elara whispered. He nodded, his eyes lingering on the children, who were already staring at the food with undisguised longing. "There are clean clothes in the closets. Towels in the bathroom. If you need anything at all, just let me know." And then he was gone again. They ate in a ravenous silence. Elara watched her children devour the food, the color slowly returning to their cheeks. For the first time in days, the gnawing ache in her own stomach subsided. After they ate, she ran a hot bath for them. They splashed in the enormous tub, their laughter echoing in the marble bathroom. It was a sound she hadn't heard in so long it made her eyes burn with tears. Tucked into clean, warm beds, wrapped in soft pajamas that had been laid out for them, Leo and Mia fell asleep almost instantly. Elara stood in the quiet darkness, watching them. Safe, warm, full. It was more than she could have dreamed of just a few hours ago. But the fear remained, a cold knot in her chest. This was a temporary reprieve, a fairy tale, and she knew better than anyone that fairy tales always ended. The next morning, Elara woke to the soft light filtering through the massive windows. For a disorienting moment, she didn't know where she was. Then the memory of the previous night rushed back. She found the children already awake, sitting by the window, watching the city wake up far below. "Is this a castle, Mommy?" Mia asked, her face pressed against the glass. "It's someone's home, sweetie," Elara said, her heart aching. A new anxiety gripped her. They had to leave. They couldn't impose any longer. She had to thank the man and take her children back out into the cold. The thought was nauseating. She dressed them in the clean clothes they'd found, which were simple but new. She smoothed their hair and washed their faces. She had to present them as worthy of the kindness they'd been shown, even if they were about to walk away from it. She found Julian in a kitchen that looked like it belonged in a magazine. He was making coffee, dressed in a simple gray sweater and dark pants. He looked less like a titan of industry and more like a regular man. A tired man. "Good morning," he said, his voice soft. And then Elara saw her. A small girl, maybe 6 years old, with big, solemn brown eyes and hair in 2 neat braids. She was sitting at a large kitchen island, clutching a stuffed rabbit and watching them with an unnerving stillness. She didn't smile. She didn't speak. She just watched. "This is my daughter, Lily," Julian said. "Lily, this is Elara, and her children, Leo and Mia." Lily's gaze flickered over them, and then back down to her rabbit. An invisible wall stood between them. This was Lily's home. They were invaders. Elara felt it instantly. We need to be going," Elara said, her voice unsteady. "Thank you so much for everything. I don't know how I can ever repay you." Julian turned from the coffee machine, his expression serious. "Going where?" "Back out there." He gestured vaguely toward the windows. "It's even colder today. There's a storm coming." "We can't stay here," Elara insisted, her cheeks flushing with shame. "We're a burden." "You are not a burden," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Stay? Please. At least until the storm passes. Let the children be warm." He was using her children against her, and he knew it. It was a checkmate she couldn't fight. She looked at Leo and Mia, their faces scrubbed clean, their bellies full. Then she looked at the silent, watchful girl at the counter. "Okay," she whispered. "Until the storm passes." The next few days were a strange, delicate dance. Elara and her children tried to be as small and quiet as possible. They stayed mostly in their rooms. Elara felt like a ghost, haunting the edges of this family's life. Julian was kind, always making sure they had what they needed, but he was also distant. He left early for work and came home late. His presence in the house was a quiet, melancholic weight. The real gatekeeper was Lily. She observed them constantly. If Mia and Leo were playing quietly in the living room, Lily would sit in a nearby chair, not playing, just watching. Her silence was a judgment. She missed her mother. Elara could see it in the profound sadness in her young eyes. These strangers, this woman and her children, were an intrusion into her grief. Elara understood. She never pushed. She never tried to force a smile or a conversation. She simply respected the girl's space, her silent sorrow. She focused on her own children, on rebuilding the sense of security that had been shattered. She read to them, helped them draw pictures, and played the picnic game, but this time with real food from Julian's well-stocked kitchen. One afternoon, Elara noticed Lily's stuffed rabbit sitting on the sofa. It was well-loved, its fur worn smooth in places. One of its button eyes was hanging by a single thread. Quietly, while Lily was in another room, Elara found a small sewing kit in a drawer. With careful, precise stitches, she secured the rabbit's eye. She reinforced the seams on its ears and mended a small tear in its paw. She didn't change it. She just healed it. She left it back on the sofa where she had found it. She never mentioned it. The next day, she was making hot chocolate in the kitchen. She made it the way her grandmother had taught her, with real milk and cocoa, a dash of cinnamon, and a tiny drop of vanilla. Leo and Mia were chattering excitedly. From the corner of her eye, she saw Lily standing in the doorway, watching. Elara poured a third mug. She placed it on the counter, not too close to where Lily was standing, but not too far away either. An offering, with no expectation. She turned her back, busying herself with her own children. After a long moment, she heard the soft scrape of the mug on the countertop. When she glanced back, both Lily and the hot chocolate were gone. It was a small victory, but it felt monumental. The storm outside raged for a week, burying the city in snow. The storm inside the penthouse began to calm. The silence in the house was no longer heavy and oppressive. It was becoming comfortable. Leo and Mia, emboldened, started to include Lily in their quiet games. They would roll a ball in her direction. At first, she ignored it. Then, one day, she tentatively rolled it back. The real breakthrough happened on a quiet Tuesday evening. Julian was working late, as usual. Elara had just tucked her children into bed. She was walking down the hallway when she saw Lily's bedroom door was ajar. She peeked inside. Lily was sitting up in bed, her repaired rabbit clutched in her arms. She was looking at a drawing she had just finished. Elara was about to retreat when Lily looked up and saw her. She didn't look startled. She simply held out the drawing. Elara stepped into the room. She took the piece of paper. It was a child's drawing, simple and beautiful. A bright yellow sun shone down on 5 stick figures. A very tall man, a woman with long brown hair, and 3 small children holding hands between them. Underneath, Lily had written her name. Elara's vision blurred with tears. She looked at Lily, whose solemn expression hadn't changed, but there was a new light in her eyes. A question, an acceptance. "It's beautiful, Lily," Elara whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you." The little girl gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. She lay down, pulling the covers up to her chin, her rabbit held tight. Elara walked out of the room, clutching the drawing to her chest. It was more than a picture. It was a key. It was a sign that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't a temporary shelter. Maybe it was the beginning of a home. The house grew quieter as the weeks turned into a month. A comfortable quiet, not the strained silence of strangers. It was the rhythm of a life starting to take shape. Elara found a routine. She made breakfast for the children, walked them to the private school Julian had insisted on enrolling them in alongside Lily. She discovered she loved to cook, filling the sterile kitchen with the warm smells of baking bread and simmering stews. She was healing. The constant, thrumming anxiety in her chest had softened to a dull ache. She no longer jumped at shadows. She was sleeping through the night, not waking up in a cold sweat from nightmares of Marcus. But Julian remained an enigma. He was kind, generous, and a wonderful father to Lily. But he kept a part of himself locked away. Elara would see it in the evenings, when the children were in bed and the house was still. He would stand by the great windows, looking out at the city, but she knew he wasn't seeing the lights. He was looking into the past. One night, a fierce wind rattled the windows, a ghostly echo of the night they had met. Elara couldn't sleep. She padded out to the kitchen for a glass of water and found him there, in the dark, a silhouette against the glittering skyline. He was holding a framed photograph. She stopped in the doorway, not wanting to intrude. But he turned, as if he had sensed her presence. I couldn't sleep either, he said, his voice husky. She walked over to the counter, her bare feet silent on the cold marble. Is that her? She asked softly. He nodded, placing the frame on the counter so she could see. The woman in the picture was beautiful, with a radiant smile and eyes that sparkled with life. It was a stark contrast to the sadness in Julian's. Her name was Sarah, he said. She was my everything. He began to talk. The words came out slowly at first, then like a river that had broken through a dam. He told her about how they met in college, how she had been the one to encourage him to start his own company. He spoke of her laugh, her terrible cooking, the way she would steal his sweaters. And then he told her how he had lost her. A car accident. A drunk driver. Instant. One moment she was on her way home from her sister's house, and the next, she was gone. Lily was only 4, he said, his voice breaking. For a year, I was just a ghost. I went to work. I came home. I made sure Lily was fed and clothed. But I wasn't there. Not really. This house, it was so full of her. Her presence was everywhere. And then, slowly, it started to fade. The silence got louder. I don't think I really understood how loud it was until I brought you here. He looked at her, his eyes raw with a grief that was still so fresh. You and Leo and Mia, you brought life back into these rooms. Tears streamed down Elara's face. She ached for his loss, for the profound loneliness he had carried for so long. He reached out and gently wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. His touch was warm, hesitant. What about you, Elara? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. You've never told me what you were running from. And in the quiet intimacy of the darkened kitchen, with the city sleeping below them, she told him. She told him about Marcus, about the charm that had first captivated her, the slow, insidious way it had twisted into control, the insults that chipped away at her self-worth, the jealousy that isolated her from her friends and family, and then the violence. She spoke of the constant fear, of walking on eggshells, of trying to protect the children from his rages. She told him about the night she left, the terror that had propelled her into the unknown, choosing the certainty of homelessness over the certainty of his abuse. I just wanted my children to know what it felt like to not be afraid. She finished, her voice choked with sobs. I just wanted them to be safe. He didn't say anything. He simply pulled her into his arms. Elara stiffened for a moment, her body conditioned to recoil from a man's embrace. But this was different. It wasn't possessive. It wasn't demanding. It was gentle. It was protective. It was a shelter. She sagged against him, and for the first time, she allowed herself to truly fall apart. She wept for the years she had lost, for the woman she had been before Marcus, for the fear and pain she had carried alone for so long. He just held her, stroking her hair, murmuring soft, comforting words. In that moment, they were not a billionaire and a homeless woman. They were just two people, their souls laid bare, finding solace in the shared geography of their scars. A bond was forged in that dark kitchen, stronger than gratitude, deeper than friendship. It was the quiet, tentative beginning of love. The world outside the penthouse continued to turn. The snow melted, and the first green shoots of spring pushed through the frozen ground. The children were thriving. Leo's quiet intensity was giving way to a boyish confidence. Mia's laughter was a constant, bright melody in the once silent home. Lily had blossomed, the shadow of her grief receding in the warmth of their new, unconventional family. Elara felt herself changing, too. With Julian's quiet encouragement, she had started taking online courses, rediscovering a passion for landscape design she had long abandoned. She was finding her voice, her confidence. She was no longer just a survivor. She was becoming herself again. The peace, however, was fragile. A bubble she was terrified would burst. And one day it did. Julian was featured in a prominent business magazine. The article lauded his genius, his philanthropy, his quiet, reclusive life. And it mentioned, in passing, the recent change in his household, a mysterious woman and her 2 children now living with him. There was a grainy photograph, taken by a paparazzo, of him and Elara dropping the children off at school. Elara's blood ran cold when she saw it. She knew, with a sickening certainty, that he would see it too. 2 days later, the doorman buzzed up. Mr. Vance, there's a man here to see you. A Mr. Marcus Thorne. He says he's here for his family. The name struck Elara like a physical blow. All the air left her lungs. The room tilted, the carefully constructed walls of her new life crumbling to dust. Julian looked at her, saw the sheer terror on her face. His expression hardened into something she had never seen before. It was cold, protective steel. "Tell him to wait," Julian said into the intercom, his voice dangerously calm. He turned to Elara. "He will not come up here. He will not get near you or the children. I promise you." But Elara was already shaking her head, backing away. "No, you don't understand," she stammered, her voice trembling. "He won't stop. He'll make a scene. He'll talk to the press. He'll ruin you. He'll tell everyone lies." "Let him," Julian said, his voice cutting through her panic. "Elara, look at me." She forced her eyes to meet his. "His words have no power here," he said. "This is your home. You are safe." But the old fear was a powerful poison. It was screaming at her to run, to disappear, to do what she had always done, to protect others by removing herself. "I have to go," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I can't let him destroy this. I can't let him hurt you or Lily." She turned and ran to her room, her mind a maelstrom of panic. She started throwing her few belongings into a bag, her hands shaking so badly she could barely grasp the clothes. The children were at school. She could be gone before they got back. It would hurt them, but it would be better than letting Marcus's darkness touch their lives again. Julian followed her. He stood in the doorway, watching her frantic movements. "Elara, stop." "I can't," she sobbed. "Don't you see? This is what I do. I bring trouble. I have to go." He crossed the room in 2 long strides and gently took her hands, stilling them. "No," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "You are not going anywhere. Your running days are over." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight as the tremors racked her body. "You are not a burden. You are not trouble. You are part of this family. And we protect our family." He tilted her chin up, forcing her to look at him. "I am not afraid of him, Elara. And you don't have to be, either. Not anymore." His words were a lifeline in the storm of her fear. She wanted to believe them. She wanted to, more than anything. He left her then and went downstairs. Elara crept to the window that overlooked the building's entrance. She saw him step outside, a tall, imposing figure. And she saw Marcus. He was smaller than she remembered, his swagger looking cheap and pathetic next to Julian's quiet strength. She couldn't hear their words, but she could see the confrontation. Marcus was gesturing wildly, his face contorted in anger. Julian stood perfectly still, unmoved, a rock against which Marcus's rage crashed and broke. After a few minutes, 2 security guards emerged and escorted a sputtering Marcus away. Julian looked up then, directly at her window, as if he knew she was watching. He didn't smile. He just held her gaze, a silent promise passing between them. "You are safe." Marcus did not go away quietly. Just as Elara had feared, he went to the tabloids. The story was ugly, a twisted narrative painting Elara as a mentally unstable gold digger who had stolen her children and latched onto a grieving billionaire. Marcus portrayed himself as a heartbroken father, desperate to get his family back. The stories were vicious. They were lies, but they were public. Julian's board of directors called an emergency meeting. His PR team was in a frenzy. The scandal threatened to tarnish the pristine image of his company. They advised him to issue a statement, to distance himself from her, to cut his losses. Instead, Julian called a press conference. He walked out onto the stage, not in a boardroom, but in the lobby of his own company headquarters, facing a sea of cameras and reporters. Elara watched on a screen from the safety of the penthouse, her hands clenched in her lap. He didn't read from a statement. He spoke from the heart. "I am aware of the recent stories in the media regarding my personal life," he began, his voice calm and steady. "They are filled with inaccuracies and malicious lies. But I am not here today to talk about my company's stock price or public relations. I am here to talk about a woman of incredible courage and strength." He looked directly into the main camera, as if he were speaking only to her. "Elara and her children came into my life during a time of great darkness for all of us. They have brought light, laughter, and healing into my home. She is a devoted and wonderful mother, and a kind, decent human being who has endured more than any person should have to. The man making these accusations is the source of her past trauma, a man from whom she fled to protect her children. My only regret is that I cannot protect her from the ugliness of his lies. But I can, and I will, stand by her. Elara and her children are my family. Any attack on them is an attack on me, and I will use every resource at my disposal to ensure their safety and their peace. We will not be intimidated. We will not be broken. This is my only statement on the matter. He turned and walked away from the podium, ignoring the barrage of shouted questions. In the penthouse, Elara was openly weeping. They were not tears of fear or sadness. They were tears of overwhelming gratitude and love. He had stood before the entire world and chosen her. He had shielded her with his name, his reputation, his power. The legal battle that followed was swift and decisive. Julian's lawyers were the best in the country. They unearthed a history of Marcus's abuse, restraining orders he had violated. Police reports Elara had been too terrified to follow through on. They presented a case so airtight, so damning, that Marcus's narrative crumbled into dust. A judge issued a permanent restraining order, barring him from coming within 1,000 feet of Elara or the children. He was stripped of any parental claim. He was, legally and finally, gone from their lives. Elara was free. Truly, irrevocably free. The final chain had been broken. That evening, the house was quiet. The victory felt solemn, a chapter closing. Elara was sitting on the sofa, watching the city lights come on. The children were in the playroom, their happy shouts a distant, comforting sound. Julian came and sat beside her. He didn't speak for a long time. He just took her hand, his thumb stroking the back of it. "It's over," she whispered. "It's over," he confirmed. "A new beginning." He turned to face her, his expression serious, tender. "Elara, this house, it wasn't a home until you came. It was just a place I lived. You, Leo, Mia, you are the heartbeat of this place. You are my heartbeat." He slid off the sofa and knelt before her. He took a small box from his pocket. Elara's breath hitched. "I know this is fast," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I know we have come from very different worlds, but our hearts speak the same language. I love you, Elara. I love your strength, your kindness, your spirit. I love the way you mother not just your own children, but mine, too." He opened the box. Inside was a simple, elegant ring with a single, clear diamond that seemed to hold all the light in the room. "I want to make this official. I want to be your husband. I want to be a father to Leo and Mia. I want us to be a family, forever. Will you marry me?" Just then, the 3 children came running into the room, drawn by the quiet intensity of the moment. They stopped, their eyes wide, taking in the scene. Mia, ever direct, pointed at Julian. "What are you doing on the floor?" Julian smiled, never taking his eyes off Elara. "I'm asking your mommy to marry me, so we can all be a family." Leo's eyes lit up. "Really? Does that mean we can call you Dad?" Lily didn't say a word. She walked over to Elara, took her free hand, and squeezed it. It was all the answer Elara needed. Tears of pure joy streamed down her face. She looked at Julian, her protector, her partner, her love. She looked at the 3 beautiful children, their faces alight with hope. "Yes," she breathed. "Yes. 1,000 times, yes." Christmas arrived a year later, not with a raging storm, but with a gentle, silent fall of snow. The penthouse, once a monument to minimalist silence, was now a festival of warmth and happy chaos. Paper snowflakes, cut out by the children, were taped to the giant windows. A massive tree stood in the corner, groaning under the weight of handmade ornaments and twinkling lights. The air smelled of pine needles and baking gingerbread. Elara stood by the fireplace, a mug of coffee warming her hands, and watched her family. Her family. The word still felt like a miracle. Julian was on the floor, wrestling playfully with Leo and Mia, who were shrieking with laughter. Lily, no longer a solemn observer, was in the middle of it all, tickling her new brother. Their giggles were the most beautiful music Elara had ever heard. She wore a simple gold band on her finger, a constant, warm weight that anchored her. Their wedding had been a small, private affair, held right here in this living room, with only the children as witnesses. It was perfect. Julian caught her eye from across the room. He smiled, a genuine, soul-deep smile that reached his eyes and crinkled the corners. The ghost of his past sorrow was gone, replaced by a profound and present joy. He had healed, just as she had. They had healed each other. He disentangled himself from the pile of laughing children and came to her side. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Merry Christmas," he murmured into her hair. "Merry Christmas," she replied, leaning back against the solid warmth of his chest. Later, after the presents had been torn open and the living room was a sea of discarded wrapping paper, Julian handed her one last gift. It was small and flat. She unwrapped it carefully. It was a simple, elegant silver frame. Inside was the drawing Lily had given her a year ago. The 5 stick figures, holding hands under a bright yellow sun. A prophecy that had come true. Elara traced the lines of the drawing with her finger, her heart full to bursting. It all came back to her. The cold, the hunger, the desperation of that night in the alley. It felt like a lifetime ago, a story about someone else. She looked at her children, their faces glowing with happiness. She looked at her husband, the man whose simple act of kindness had rewritten all of their futures. She had been a woman defined by her trauma, a broken soul running from the past. He had been a man locked in his grief, a protector living in a gilded cage of loneliness. Now they were whole. They had found that the deepest healing comes not from forgetting the scars, but from building a new life so full of love that the old wounds no longer have the power to hurt. They had learned that family is not just about blood, but about who you choose to stand with in the storm. The city glittered outside the windows, cold and beautiful. But inside, in the home they had built together, there was only warmth. It was the quiet, undeniable warmth of a love that had been forged in the coldest of nights, a love strong enough to last a lifetime.